Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Free Think Dojo. If you've been on this channel long and watched any of my other videos, you probably see a theme of a lot of those videos pertaining to society. Whether it's the traits that I see society taking on as time goes on, or just disturbing things or concerning things that I've seen society do recently, I feel like a lot of our society and just the general public in general is starting to transform into a different beast. In regards to the events that occurred last week in the US, I saw a lot of different reactions from different people, a lot of different personalities colliding and such. But I also started to notice a trait that only rears its ugly head when it is drawn out, and that is our obsession or fascination with violence. So today in the dojo, I thought I would give my take on society's love or infatuation with violence as a whole, but also how today's world is starting to draw it out of us a lot more and what that means for the future. Something I do want to preface before I go any further is I do not condone of violence. As a martial artist, I've always trained to discipline myself, and if I have emotions of violence, to learn how to control those. No matter how many punches I've thrown, or how many kicks I've thrown, or how many guns have been shot or swords clashed, none of the violence has ever been a permanent solution to any world issues, especially within society. Now, obviously, you can look at wars or anything where someone has used self defense or, something where their violence has been put towards a positive cause to save someone. And you can say that that has caused, problems to seize and solutions to be provided. But it's always temporary. There's always going to be another war. There's always going to be another fight or another chance to defend yourself. And that's just what I want to point across is it's not ever going to be a permanent solution for anything. It's just only going to buy you time. But why do we love it? If you haven't noticed already, there are a lot of violent things being thrown around in our life. Now, obviously, some things are more violent than others. You have controlled violence through like a video game or a movie, or even something like a UFC match or a boxing match. It's something that is a form of entertainment if it's within a controlled setting. You're probably lying if you say that you don't like to watch somebody get kicked in the nuts on the internet and laugh about it, or, someone come up and slap somebody and make a joke about it. Obviously, anything out there that promotes violence, people usually try to run away from, but something that just exemplifies violence in some controlled fashion, usually don't care too much about. I'm not judging in any way if someone watches controlled violence. Obviously, I watch UFC, I watch boxing, I've boxed in my time. I do fight people every now and again in a sparring setting. But when it's not controlled, I feel like that's where it can become an issue. There are videos out there of wars going on, live streamed wars. But then there's also stuff like gore sites. And especially back in the day, you could see people being beheaded on the internet and just crazy stuff like that. And it's almost a morbid curiosity, especially if you were a kid at the time, just to watch the video because you just want to see what actually happened. And you end up leaving with a lot more than you were wanting. I mean, violence creates trauma. Whether it's a small amount of trauma just to keep you on your toes or it is something that affects you over time, violence is designed to kind of keep people in check. When you see a boxing match and somebody gets punched in the face, you go, oh, I don't really want to experience what that person just did, so I'm going to try my best to stay out of a situation like that. And then, of course, if you see something on a gore side of someone being killed or whatever, you just want to try and avoid those situations. But in today's world, especially with a lot of, unrest and a lot of violence being thrown around in regular places that you wouldn't expect it to be, I feel like a lot of people are getting to a point where this fascination and this borderline obsession with violence is starting to become a little nasty. In today's world, there's a lot of violence, and you can't really deny that. Obviously, all around the world, not only in one place, violence is becoming more common. And I feel like for a lot of people, they feel very unsafe in this world. They feel a lot of fear in this world. So when you're overexposed to something like violence on the daily, whether it is controlled or uncontrolled, it is starting to get more reactions out of people. And when they get those reactions in an unstable state, when they're fearful and unsure, they're going to start reacting instinctively. And most of the time, that's with violence. Now, obviously, the extent of that violence is up to the individual. I don't think everybody is extremely violent in nature. I feel like everybody has some sort of violence built within them and the capabilities to do violence, but some people just aren't violent in nature. Some people don't have the ability or the thought processes or just don't want to be violent. For the people that do exemplify a lot of violent traits, usually they take the route of doing it themselves in retaliation or trying to get revenge, or they get in groups and try to, go about it that way. And then the people that aren't violent in nature, though, they usually are kind of, I guess, kept in check in a sense, because if they see other people trying to be violent, they just try to stay out of the way. Now, both of those sides are part of a bigger issue. I feel like this fear and uncertainty does only go in those two paths, but ultimately, all of our thought processes are focused on the violent part. But whether you are the one out there committing the violent act or you're just viewing it from a distance, I feel like we all want to be in the know when it comes to violent acts. We all want to see it. We all want to watch it. We all want to be aware that it is happening. And whether that is an overall obsession or fascination, I think that depends on the individual. But the matter of the fact is that when violence is so common these days, it's almost impossible not to be curious. Now, whether this acknowledgement or fascination to violence is going to become a bigger issue in the future, only time will tell. And I think at this point, it's only going to go in one of two directions, or maybe both. For the people that are promoting and pushing for violence, they're going to continue to do that. I think there's always going to be people out there that want to see something be incited. They want to see something that will explode and blow up and become a bigger substance of violence. But then there's also the people, on the other hand, that are the ones that are fearful of it, the ones that don't want violence. And for them, they're either just going to let it happen and stay away, or there will be people that will fight back. Now, whether that fighting back will be, violent in nature as well, or, try to find more of a peaceful way of combating it, I feel at the end of the day, there is going to be some sort of, retaliation to the retaliation, if that makes sense, just because that's what wars are. Both sides think they're right in what they're doing, and they have intent to fight for it, but it really just depends on, what their messages are. I do find it very interesting and just ironic that violence always starts. The wars always start, and then somebody else has to come in and stop it. Either way, they're committing violence, but for different reasons. But at the same time, violence always happens. Most people will have to learn to control their violent natures. They'll have to discipline themselves to not hurt others and learn how to be peaceful. And if you think about it, as a kid, you throw balls at somebody, you hit people on accident, you don't know any better because you haven't learned how to control those tendencies. Somebody will have to teach you. But unfortunately, it is the reality that some people will never have that discipline. Somebody will incite violence at the drop of a pin because that's all that they know. They haven't been taught to have discipline. They haven't taught to be controlled, so they go with their basic instinct, which is to fight. I think for the future, it's kind of hard to tell which direction people are going to start going into. I think what's also scarier these days is because we are overly consuming media all the time that is violent, and we are fascinated in our own ways. I think we'll have a decision of fight or flight, but it will depend on what that event that incites that violent nature within us is revolved around. I think for some people, if a certain event happens that doesn't affect them directly, or they don't have any emotion towards, they will probably just flight. They won't react on it. They'll, not push violence. But if it is something that is going to incite a violent nature within them, they might turn the other way. But my advice would be, just coming from a martial artist that has worked on discipline his entire life so far, I feel like since we all have these violent natures, I would advise everybody to just accept it, acknowledge it, that it is the case, but also just find ways that work for you to control those tendencies, find ways to cope with it. And obviously, some people will have more tendencies than others and more thoughts than others, and it really just depends on what works for you. But find a way to control those emotions and control those thoughts, because at the end of the day, it could change who you are. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I know this topic is pretty complicated, and I'm sure a lot of people have, strong emotions and opinions on it. But I'm really curious to see what you guys think about this fascination with violence, or this obsession with violence, and what you think is going to be happening to us as a society. Anyways, guys, peace and love to everybody joining me in the dojo today. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, like the video, and share it with your friends to grow the dojo. And I'll talk to you guys next time.